The day I found out I was pregnant, my husband abandoned me in the pouring rain to run to his first love. "She's not feeling well and really needs me," he said. Later, he showed up holding the abortion papers. Calmly, I told him, "I've decided to let go of this child and of you." How ironic. The man who once accused me of being intolerant was now the one on his knees, begging me not to leave. Chapter 1. The torrential rain poured relentlessly as Alaric abandoned me on the roadside. His precious Elawan was ill and had even threatened to harm herself with a knife. Her life mattered, but did the child growing in my womb not? The rain soaked through my clothes, its icy chill piercing straight to my heart. I had endured countless bowls of bitter herbal medicine, innumerable acupuncture sessions, and immense physical suffering to conceive this child. For 3 days, I stayed in the hospital receiving 4 treatments, yet Alaric neither visited nor called, not even once. "Jessamine, you're carrying his child, and he still treats you like this." My best friend, Bryony, fumed on my behalf. "Elawan is sick," I replied softly. Bryony fell silent. We both understood the truth. Elawan was Alaric's cherished first love, a haunting memory from his youth that had lingered for years. When I returned home from the hospital, Ella immediately fussed over me, though it was clear her concern lay more with the unborn child than with me. "The doctor said I need to rest and take care of the pregnancy," I told her truthfully. Hearing this, Ella panicked, promptly instructing the housekeeper to prepare nourishing soup for me. She then personally helped me to my room to rest. After 3 years of marriage, this was the first time I felt any semblance of care from my in-laws. She even insisted that Alaric come home to look after me, but his response was indifferent. "I'm not a doctor." Although she couldn't persuade her son to return, Ella transferred $5 million into my bank account. At a party not long after, I encountered Elawan again. She shone brightly, like a star. The moment Alaric saw her, he released my hand without hesitation and walked straight to her, utterly disregarding my presence. If Elawan hadn't gone abroad, Jessamine wouldn't be standing in her place now. Came the murmurs around me. I endured the mockery and ridicule in silence, my forced smile barely holding as I remained painfully aware that most of the people here looked down on me. "Jessamine Ellis is truly lucky," someone sneered. Elawan, meanwhile, chatted and laughed as if nothing were amiss, showing no signs of the supposed illness that had drawn Alaric to her side. The two of them began to dance, their movements captivating under the spotlight, until a pianist started playing a Chopin piece. Suddenly, Elawan lost control, slamming her fists into her forehead until blood began to drip down. "Who's playing that piece? Stop it!" Alaric shouted, rushing to her side to calm her. Elawan bit into his wrist, drawing blood that splattered onto the floor. I watched the scene unfold with narrowed eyes, finally realizing the truth: she was genuinely unwell. The innocent pianist, meanwhile, had been pushed to the ground in the chaos. Elawan's body trembled violently before she was hurriedly escorted out. Throughout it all, my husband didn't spare me even a single glance. The other guests turned their gazes back to me, their eyes brimming with ridicule and pity. How heartless to treat Jessamine like this. Isn't she pregnant? Having a child won't make him love you if he doesn't already. I placed a hand over my belly, staring at the familiar lines of a music score as a bitter smile crept onto my face. Over the following days, I waited for Alaric to come home, but after 3 consecutive nights of his absence, I realized I had long grown used to this. When I picked up my paintbrush, I was able to momentarily escape my thoughts. I paused while sketching a face, then added a tear-shaped beauty mark beneath the corner of one eye. "Still painting him, aren't you?" Alaric's mother Ella said as she brought me a steaming bowl of chicken soup. "You need to take extra care of yourself now." I nodded, closing my sketchbook. I had heard that the day Elawan learned of Alaric's marriage, she stood on the rooftop of a hospital, swaying perilously close to the edge. "You said you'd always wait for me," she had screamed, tears glistening as the wind carried her voice. "You're all liars. Every single one of you." Hearing this, Alaric had stopped in his tracks, unable to approach further. You learned piano just because I wanted to hear it, and yet you abandoned me. She had shouted, her voice raw with anguish. The image of the once proud and commanding woman, who used to delegate tasks from the shadows, now teetering on the edge of a rooftop, was startling. At that moment, Alaric shoved me forward, as if I could somehow mend the situation. But I had no desire to deceive her. We've been married for 3 years, and now we have an 8-week-old baby, I said quietly. I noticed the tension on Alaric's face after my words, and I couldn't help but find it amusing. Alawan broke down completely, losing her balance and nearly falling. Alaric slapped me across the face before rushing to grab hold of her. That was when I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen, followed by a warm liquid trickling down my legs. Sweat broke out on my forehead as a wave of nausea washed over me. You're bleeding. Mrs. Spencer, you're bleeding. Someone shouted. Upon seeing this, Alaric pushed Alawan aside and ran over to hold me. For the first time, he showed concern and anxiety for me, and it was almost shocking. Chapter 2. The child had miraculously been saved. Jessamine. Alaric approached me, carrying a bowl of chicken soup. I turned my head away. It was a critical moment. Alawan almost jumped. I was tired of hearing the same excuse over and over. When are we getting a divorce? I asked him flatly. I will never divorce you. Alaric's bright eyes darkened, their light replaced by something heavier. My expression grew colder, but Alaric set the bowl aside and wrapped his arms around me, his voice trembling as he pleaded softly. Jessamine, please don't leave me. I'll sort things out with Alawan soon, I promise. I could feel the faint tremor in his body. He was genuinely scared. But could he truly let go of Alawan? The fleeting warmth lasted less than a minute before his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and declined the call. Then it rang again. And again. After 5 relentless calls, he finally answered. Alaric, Alawan's holding a knife and hasn't come out of her room for over an hour. I smirked faintly, waiting to see what he would choose. Break down the door. His tone sharpened, his frustration leaking through. Alaric. There's blood pooling under the door. Stay calm, I'll be there right away. He said, his voice laced with urgency. He threw on his coat, pausing to glance at me as if searching for something to say. I turned away from him, gazing at the trumpet creepers in full bloom outside the window. When the door clicked shut, a few tears escaped my eyes, but my resolve remained steadfast. After the surgery, I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the gentle, unburdened rhythm of my heartbeat. The darkness that had enveloped me for so long began to dissipate, and a quiet light filled the void within me. Jessamine, what have you done? Bryony stormed into the hospital room, setting a bag of supplements on the table. How's the baby? You look so pale. It's gone. I said with a faint smile. Bryony froze, her complexion paling as she fumbled for her phone, intent on calling Alaric. I stopped her. I had the procedure half an hour ago. Her anger dissolved into shock. Jessamine, you've really let go. I chuckled softly. Let go? He's just a narcissist. Bryony was stunned into silence, finally muttering. You've been trapped in this marriage for 7 years. Her words struck a chord deep within me. My chest tightened and my vision blurred with unshed tears. 7 years. 2 days later, after some rest, Bryony accompanied me back to Alaric's house to pack my belongings. You shouldn't overexert yourself while you're pregnant, Ella said, trying to stop me. The baby's gone. My cold words cut through her concern as I met her anxious gaze. She stood there, stunned. But the doctor said the baby was fine after the bleeding, how could it be gone? I ignored her, placing the divorce papers on the table. Mrs. Spencer, congratulations on finally ridding yourself of such an unworthy daughter-in-law. Alaric was coaxing Alawan to eat when he received his mother's call. "Mom," he answered wearily, but the moment he heard about Jessamine filing for divorce, his fatigue disappeared, replaced by sharp clarity. "The baby's gone?" When Alawan reached out with her scarred arms, begging him to stay, he had never felt more resolute. As he reached the door, she began to lose control, banging her head against the wall. Her scream stopped him in his tracks for a brief moment, but he didn't turn back. Leaving her wasn't as difficult as he'd imagined it would be. Back home, Ella was inconsolable, crying over the lost grandchild and demanding he divorce the useless Jessamine immediately. He ignored her. When his gaze landed on the divorce papers sitting on the table, his mind went blank. On his way home, he had convinced himself that Jessamine still loved him, that she wouldn't go through with the divorce. But now, all his delusions crumbled. His hands trembled as he opened the papers. At the very end, he found the abortion report. His mind reeled. She had willingly given up the child they had struggled so hard to conceive. How could she do this? How dare she? A sharp pain ripped through his chest. Grabbing the report, he stormed out the door. He couldn't wait to confront her, to demand an answer for her heartlessness. Alawan's life was hanging by a thread, her condition critical. Yet Jessamine chose this moment to sulk. She was nothing like the obedient girl she used to be. And it was because she'd been obedient that he had married her. Chapter 3. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Alaric standing there, his face twisted with rage. "Jessamine, how dare you abort my child?" I tried to slam the door shut, but his hand got caught in the frame. Furious, he shoved the door open, forcing his way inside. "You shameless woman. You're seeing someone else and still dare to bully my Jessamine." Bryony, who had been watching from the kitchen, stormed over with a spatula in hand, ready to defend me. Alaric's custom-made suit ended up smeared with oil as she swung at him. His face darkened as he yanked the jacket off and flung it to the floor. "Jessamine, are you really determined to fight me to the bitter end?" I couldn't help but laugh coldly. Things had escalated to this point, and he still thought I was picking a fight with him. What gave him the audacity to believe that, no matter how much humiliation I endured, I'd keep smiling and telling him I was fine? "You went ahead and aborted the child without my consent. I'm willing to forgive you, but stop interfering with Alawan and me," he said, clutching the abortion report so tightly his knuckles turned white, veins bulging from his hands. "Let's get divorced," I said, my voice calm and steady as I met his gaze. His eyes still carried the power to move me, but all I felt was disgust. "If you don't want a divorce, I can compensate you," he replied, trying to suppress his anger. A strained smile flickered across his face, as though he thought he could patch everything up. Compensate? He had long since drained every ounce of hope I once had for the future, yet here he was, still pretending. As Alaric turned to leave, I offered him a faint smile. "I don't want children anymore, and I certainly don't want you." The door closed behind me, but his stunned expression lingered in my mind. Moments later, he began pounding on the door with all his strength, the sound echoing through the house. I called the police, and we were both taken to the station. His hand was bleeding, red staining his crisp white shirt. It was the first time I had ever seen him look so disheveled. "Your husband seems to care about you. Could there be some sort of misunderstanding?" a female officer asked, trying to mediate. "Even if he cheated, can't I still file for divorce?" I said sharply, shooting Alaric a cold glance. It finally dawned on him that I was serious. His expression stiffened, his mouth opening as though to argue, but no words came out. Outside the station, Alaric stood beside me, looking dejected and helpless. "Jessamine, let's talk," he pleaded. I ignored him. Instead, my gaze drifted to a familiar figure standing under a nearby tree. "Are you cold? You don't look well," Leander said as he strode toward me. He shrugged off his coat and draped it over my shoulders. "I'm fine, Leander," I replied with a faint smile. "It's just, I had surgery 3 days ago." Leander carefully zipped up the coat, his movements gentle and deliberate. Then, without warning, he swung his fist at Alaric. The punch landed squarely, and Alaric, caught off guard, staggered back. He quickly recovered, preparing to retaliate, but Leander's next words froze him in his tracks. In these 3 years, you've made countless mistakes, and Jessamine endured all of them. Now, you've driven her to harm herself. Alaric, you should be ashamed of yourself. Leander's punches came one after another, and though Alaric took them without much resistance, he only wiped the blood from his mouth nonchalantly. Leander, help me persuade Jessamine. She's insisting on a divorce. I was astonished at his audacity to ask my brother for help. Hearing the word divorce, Leander halted his punches and instead delivered a hard kick to Alaric's knee. She should have left you a long time ago. Without sparing Alaric another glance, I got into Leander's car. When we arrived home, the dining table was covered with all my favorite dishes. Jessamine, the Hesper family will always have your back, my uncle said, handing me a steaming bowl of soup. Take care of yourself. After finishing the soup, my father added more food to my plate, but I barely touched it. Why aren't you eating, Jessamine? My father asked, his voice full of concern. No matter how good the food is, it will never compare to Mom's cooking, I murmured, setting down my chopsticks as a wave of sadness washed over me. My father fell silent, his expression heavy with guilt, as though he had done something wrong. After dinner, I wandered into the piano room, where a grand piano sat in the center, pristine and untouched. The keys gleamed under the soft light. As I ran my fingers over them, it felt as though I was reaching out to my mother across time. I touched the keys 25 times, a reflection of my uneventful life. On my 5th birthday, I had wished for a piano of my own. By the time my wish came true, my mother was no longer there to see it. Aren't you going to play something? Leander's voice startled me. He stood leaning against the doorframe, dressed in loungewear, his demeanor casual yet comforting. I lifted my hands from the keys and gazed up at the chandelier, trying to hold back the tears threatening to fall. It's been 7 years, Leander said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. You can't keep living in the past. There's a long road ahead. But the tears came anyway, sliding down my cheeks as my chest tightened with grief. The future might hold light, but it no longer held the person I loved most. 3 days later, Alaric said he wanted to celebrate my birthday. I couldn't help but wonder if he'd lost his mind. Why wasn't he busy doting on his so-called true love? Birthday? I hadn't celebrated that in 7 years. Chapter 4. On my birthday, I placed a bouquet of trumpet creeper flowers on a tombstone and gently traced the edges of the photo embedded on it. The boy in the photo wore a radiant smile, a scar cutting through his eyebrow, a mark he earned saving me. In his final moments, he had been consumed with the thought of protecting me. The vivid red that pooled on the ground that day became an unshakable nightmare, haunting me for 6 months. By evening, I noticed a series of missed calls on my phone, all from Alaric. Where have you been? I've been looking for you all day. Alaric's voice carried a mix of fatigue and frustration. Tell me where you are. I'll come pick you up. I didn't reply. Instead, I hung up. After 3 years of neglect, his sudden desire to celebrate my birthday felt nothing short of laughable. I thought that would be the end of it, but Alaric didn't relent. He kept calling well into the night. Jessie, how could you use me as a substitute? I drew back the curtains and glanced outside. Alaric was leaning against his car, his figure illuminated faintly by the streetlights. He held a cigarette between his fingers, though he had barely smoked it. A pile of extinguished cigarette butts lay scattered at his feet. Ever since I began suspecting I was pregnant, he had rarely touched cigarettes. I closed the curtains and sighed. A heavy storm was forecasted for tonight. Switching my phone to Do Not Disturb. I climbed into bed and turned off the lights. The temperature dropped as the night deepened, and a thin layer of mist clung to Alaric's damp clothes. His knees had grown numb, yet the sharp ache in his chest was far worse. No wonder she always refused to finish her paintings. Closing his eyes, he pictured the boy in the framed photograph. There was a resemblance, the eyes perhaps. But the boy had something Alaric didn't, a small mole at the corner of his right eye. He recalled how Jessamine used to trace her fingertip along the corner of her own eye and smile. "This is my favorite part," she'd say. Sometimes she'd use a pen to draw a small mark in the same spot on Alaric's face. Whenever she did, her demeanor would change, becoming soft, tender, almost unrecognizable. Cough. Choking on the smoke, Alaric stubbed out the cigarette and let it crumble into ash. The light in Jessamine's room had long since gone out. He stood there, staring at the darkened window, bitter disappointment settling in his chest. The birthday celebration he had meticulously planned had failed before it even began. At that moment, he felt like the biggest fool in Springfield. How could he not have realized? No matter how outrageous his actions had been, she never got angry. Because none of it mattered to her. He wasn't a person to her, just a shadow. A perfect replica of someone she'd lost. And that someone wasn't just anyone, they were a criminal. How pathetic was he, chasing after her affection? If it hadn't been for Elowen, he would have never uncovered the depth of his own foolishness. A crack of thunder echoed through the night as the rain began to pour. Alaric stood there, letting the downpour drench him, as if punishing himself for his own blindness. He thought back to the rainstorm on the day Jessamine had been diagnosed with her first pregnancy. That day, she had been left to face everything alone while he held the upper hand. The storm lasted for hours, but even after it passed, the light in Jessamine's room never flickered back on. Finally, Alaric brushed the lingering moisture from his face, whether rain or tears, he couldn't tell, and climbed into his car. Without a backward glance, he drove away. Chapter 5. 7 days later, I attended a party, and my eyes immediately landed on Alaric and Elowen. Mr. Spencer and Miss Tate are such a perfect match. A true pair made in heaven. Jessamine Ellis should have stepped aside ages ago. Elowen was seated at the grand piano, playing a delicate tune while Alaric's gaze lingered on her, full of warmth. They exuded an air of harmony and affection. So, this time she didn't lose her temper? When the piece concluded, applause erupted from the crowd. Miss Tate truly lives up to her reputation as a prodigy from the Manhattan School of Music. Radiant, Elowen strutted over to me, her lips curling into a smirk as she whispered, "Jessamine, even if you've taken Alaric for now, I'll make sure to get him back. 7 years ago, I crushed you under my heel, and I can do it again today. I can't wait to see you groveling like a dog again." As she reached out to shove me, I preemptively pushed her instead. With a loud crash, Elowen stumbled backward into the dining table. Crimson wine splattered across her pale apricot gown, the fabric soaking up the liquid like an expanding stain. Broken glass littered the ground around her, completing her disheveled appearance. "Elowen! Jessamine! Why must you always target Elowen?" Alaric bellowed at me, his gaze ablaze with fury, a far cry from the meek demeanor he displayed that night. He raised his hand as though to strike me, but an arm shot out, stopping him mid-motion. "Mr. Spencer! Isn't that Leander? He rarely shows up to events like these. Doesn't he dislike his half-sister?" "Leander!" Alaric snarled through gritted teeth. "This is between me and my wife. Stay out of it." Leander ignored him entirely, his focus shifting to my arm. Shards of glass were embedded in my skin, and fresh blood trickled down. "Does it hurt?" Leander's voice was low, laced with an unfamiliar tenderness. Alaric froze momentarily at the sight of my injury but quickly masked it with anger. "You brought this on yourself." My blue dress was stained with wine, and before I could react, Leander scooped me up effortlessly. He turned to Alaric, his tone flat yet piercing. "It seems I didn't hit you hard enough last time." Leander carried me out of the ballroom. Once we were clear of the crowd, I tried to wriggle free. "Put me down," I insisted. He pressed his lips into a thin line, ignored my protests, and ushered me into the car. After instructing the driver to head to the hospital, he sat beside me. The blood from my arm had already seeped into his crisp suit, staining it dark red. The car ride back was stifling. The weight of unspoken words hung thick in the air, making it hard to breathe. "I'll handle this for you," Leander said, his voice calm but resolute. His face was shadowed, his expression unreadable. "There's no need," I replied flatly. "Jessamine." His sudden outburst startled me. "Could you, for once, take care of yourself? Does your well-being mean nothing to you? Elawan is in a worse state," I quipped nonchalantly. "She's lying in a pool of blood, covered in glass shards. What's a little blood on me in comparison?" Leander stared at me for several beats before leaning forward and wrapping me tightly in his arms. His embrace was so sudden, so fierce, it left me frozen. After a while, I felt something warm and damp against my neck. Was he crying? I remained motionless, caught between disbelief and exhaustion. Amid my haze of consciousness, I faintly heard him murmur, "But my heart hurts." The next morning, my name was trending. The arrogant Miss Ellis. Clips of the party had been uploaded online, showing me shoving Elawan. The video captured her dramatic fall into a pool of spilled wine, blood staining her fair skin as glass shards scattered around her. The cherry on top was my cold, dismissive smirk. After watching the footage, I set my phone down with a calmness I didn't feel. It had finally begun, this storm I'd anticipated for over a month. Users began digging into my past, posting allegations of bullying from supposed high school classmates. They even uploaded doctored evidence, grainy videos of fabricated altercations, no doubt AI generated with face-swapping tools. The absurdity of it all was almost laughable. Meanwhile, the Hesper Group's official social media accounts were inundated with vitriol, with netizens blaming me for everything under the sun. Then Alaric called, "Jessamine, get to the hospital and apologize to Elawan right now." His voice was sharp, accusatory. "In your dreams." I rolled my eyes. "Do you have to drag both the Alaric and Hesper families into your mess? Elawan's willing to forgive you, yet you refuse to let things go. Tomorrow at 9. Meet me at the Civil Affairs office to finalize the divorce." I cut him off before hanging up. Alaric, ever the opportunist, wouldn't let me go easily. Bryony, on the other hand, was basking in newfound fame. By mimicking my style, she'd secured several lucrative deals and was reveling in her moment under the spotlight. Leander tried to reassure me. "Don't worry, everything is under control." My uncle echoed his sentiments. "The Hesper family will always have your back. You're not alone in this." Even my father, who rarely showed his emotions, knocked on my door multiple times that day, awkwardly asking about lunch. "You've already asked 3 times. I snapped, my patience thin. He flushed, visibly flustered, before retreating. The sight of his graying temples pricked at my heart, and my eyes burned with unshed tears. When the online furor reached its peak, I made my move. I released intimate photos and videos of Alaric and Elawan, our marriage certificate, my pregnancy report, and most damning of all, footage of Alaric pushing me hard enough to draw blood. Chapter 6. The online discussion shifted dramatically. This is how a rightful wife handles the mistress. What a scumbag. Cheating on his pregnant wife and even pushing her. If I were pregnant and found out my husband was cheating, I'd end things immediately. Girl, don't let yourself suffer. The posts criticizing me were nearly drowned out. Jessamine Ellis. Explain yourself. Elawan is covered in injuries, both physical and psychological. Do you really want to drive her to the brink? I set my phone to silent and blocked him without hesitation. Shortly after, Elawan posted a lengthy essay online, detailing her relationship with Alaric. She attached 6 photos: her music academy acceptance letter, proof of her parents' deaths, her mental illness diagnosis, a picture of the 2 of them together, her injury report, and a photo of herself swaddled in bandages, only her face exposed. Netizens quickly sympathized with Elawan and painted me as the homewrecker. they remarked on Alaric's tender gaze toward her, contrasting it with his cold indifference toward me. Many believed that my relationship with Alaric had driven Alawan into a downward spiral, ruining her life. People on the internet tend to side with those who appear fragile and unfortunate, even when the truth might be otherwise. In response, I released surveillance footage from that day, which clearly showed that Alawan had been the one to strike first. But some argued, "But Miss Tate has a mental illness." I found this laughable. If she was unwell, she should seek treatment, not unleash chaos on others. Acting out while knowing her instability only showed her irresponsibility. Others accused me of bullying the weak, calling my actions unforgivable. However, when the Hesper family released a certified report verifying the video's authenticity, the critics fell silent. During this time, Alaric's company stocks took a nosedive, and Alawan faced intense backlash from the public. Yet, despite pressure from his mother, Alaric refused to end his involvement with her. It had been years since I last dreamed of Merrick, but last night, he appeared again. In the dream, he held a music box and wished me a happy birthday. Just as I reached out to take it, the dream abruptly ended, and the music box shattered into pieces. I woke up with a heavy pressure in my chest. I took medication to manage rejection symptoms, but it didn't help. Since my heart transplant, I had never experienced such discomfort. I decided to visit the hospital for a checkup. On my way out, a figure suddenly stepped in front of my car. I slammed on the brakes, and upon recognizing the person, my anger dissipated slightly. "7 years, Jesse, and it seems you're doing well," the woman said, greedily scanning my outfit. "That wardrobe of yours must have cost a fortune. Don't forget about Merrick's mother now that you're living a lavish life. After all, my son died because of you." Her words pierced my heart like a dagger, dragging me back to the sight of Merrick lying lifeless on the ground, blood pooling around him. "What do you want?" I forced myself to stay calm. "Now that you're the big heiress, give me $1 million to enjoy my retirement," she demanded, her eyes gleaming with greed. "And maybe throw in a house too. Keep dreaming," I said coldly. The hush money from 7 years ago must be gone by now. "Jessamine Ellis, how dare you talk to me like that?" She threw herself onto the ground, wailing. "This woman killed my son and won't compensate me," but this was the outskirts of the city, and there was no one around. After sitting there for about 3 minutes without anyone passing by, she grudgingly got up and left. "Jessamine, you heartless snake. I thought of letting it go for Merrick's sake, but clearly, there's no need. Just wait." I stood motionless, watching her retreat. I had been waiting for 7 years. Later, she posted a video online, accusing me of being the reason for her son's death, along with Merrick's death certificate and family-provided photos. The incident stirred an uproar on the internet. I wasn't worried about myself, but I couldn't stand seeing Merrick's name tarnished further. Netizens dug into my past and found records of me being detained for 40 days at age 15 for accidentally injuring my father. Scum like this deserved to die. Good riddance. Anyone who can harm their own father is a monster. Miss Ellis dated such a lowlife in high school. How unique. A sharp pain gripped my chest, making it difficult to breathe. That wasn't the truth. Just as I was about to post a rebuttal, I received an email. Attached was a photo of Merrick, covered in blood. Chapter 7. His fingers were crushed under someone's foot, pale as death, yet he didn't make a sound. They hammered his ribs again and again. Merrick smiled at the camera, and I could clearly make out what he said. "Don't be afraid, Jessamine." The thread in my mind snapped without warning. My heart raced violently, each beat more frantic than the last. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. "Jessie!" Leander's voice greeted me as I opened my eyes. "There's a rejection reaction with your heart. You need to stay here for observation," he said gently, trying to reassure me. "I'll take care of Merrick's situation." Tears streamed uncontrollably down my cheeks. "Don't worry," Leander said softly, wiping the tears from the corners of my eyes. "You've been through too much. Rest now." My lips began to tremble, and noticing this, Leander immediately had the doctors administer a sedative. In that moment, I felt as though I'd been thrown back into the psychiatric hospital. Every time I closed my eyes, Merrick's bloodied figure haunted me. Leander put all his work aside to stay by my side. After 2 sleepless nights, he instructed the doctors to give me tranquilizers. But even then, I couldn't sleep. On the 3rd day, Leander showed me a video. In it, Merrick wore his middle school uniform, his face unblemished, a trace of youthful shyness in his expression. It was his first time facing a camera. It took him several moments to string together a complete sentence. "Jesse, happy birthday in advance. I'll be at a competition and won't be home. I'll bring you a present when I'm back." I gripped the phone tightly, unwilling to let go. At 15, Merrick hadn't yet been scarred by the world. He was a mathematical genius. That competition earned him first place nationally. He had a future that once shone so brightly. I'd once asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. "I want to be a researcher," he'd said, his voice filled with conviction. "I'll create a cure for heart disease so you'll never have to suffer again." That night, I had a beautiful dream. I returned to Springfield, walking through familiar alleyways until I opened the door to my house. Inside, I saw my mother. She was wearing a white dress, busying herself in the kitchen, making braised pork just for me. "Jesse, you're home. Dinner's almost ready," she called out warmly. I slowly walked toward her, opening my arms to embrace her. This time, I could feel her warmth, real and tangible. "Your father's not home again," she said with a chuckle. "Why don't you invite Merrick over for dinner?" I went to Merrick's house and knocked on his door. It was summer, but he was wearing a long-sleeved shirt. A faint bruise marred the corner of his mouth. When he saw me, he quickly covered it with his hand. Teenagers hate looking weak in front of their friends, but Merrick's actions weren't about pride. He just didn't want me to worry. "Don't cry," he said in a fluster, hurriedly grabbing a tissue to wipe my tears. He didn't realize that just seeing him hurt like that was enough to shatter me inside. After dinner, my mother applied ointment to his bruises. "Next time, if someone tries to hit you, just run, okay?" she said gently. For a few years after that, it seemed like he stopped getting hurt. At least, that's what we thought. But before the high school entrance exams, something unbearable happened. That was when Merrick finally fought back, stabbing his father to death. Chapter 8. During my hospital stay, Alaric visited me. "You have a heart condition?" he asked, his eyes complicated. I ignored him, continuing to paint, depicting the boy's face for the first time with care. In the painting, he was in a peach tree, handing me the first yellow peach of the summer. "I didn't expect you to be so leisurely as a patient." Alaric glanced at the canvas, his tone mocking. I paused my brush, looking up at him. He continued. "Jessamine, let's get divorced. I can't face you anymore." After being discharged, the first thing I did was head to the Civil Affairs office. Holding the freshly issued divorce certificate, I ran into a happy couple walking in hand. The girl complained about the boy's lack of maturity, laughing all the while. The boy, even more pleased, said, "I've waited 15 years for this moment." This couple, who had known each other for years, finally tied the knot. How enviable. Merrick's mother gained tens of thousands of followers by exploiting her son's story online. Each live stream brought her considerable income. I heard Alaric was about to marry Alawan. One sweltering evening, Leander and I went to a Western restaurant for dinner. As the sun set, I sat there playing a piece I had composed. Dreamlike. June 4th happened to be Merrick's birthday. After finishing, I was surprised to see Alaric standing not far away, his expression unreadable. "I didn't know you could play the piano, and this piece too." He seemed astonished. I remained silent, and Alawan quickly interjected. "Alaric, I can play it for you as many times as you want." Leander quickly took me away. After dinner, we encountered Alaric again in the parking lot. How do you know this melody? He persisted. Before I could explain, Ilawan, looking pale, grabbed Alaric's arm. Reluctantly he left, but not before glaring at me. On the day of Ilawan and Alaric's wedding, the event was grand, and I was even listed as a guest. Despite the bride's unique, priceless gown, it couldn't hide her malice. During the video presentation, a clip showed several girls, under Ilawan's direction, forcing me into a filthy slop pit, making me eat the muck. They used a burning iron rod to scorch my arms and other parts of my body. They even placed thumbtacks and what seemed like blood on my seat. When I sat down, the pain was excruciating, and my heart ached with shame. The video showed the girls raising their hands to the teacher. It's disgusting, she stained the seat with her period. The teacher looked disgusted and told me to leave immediately. The thumbtacks dug deep into my skin, making every step painful. The scene switched to Ilawan stepping on Merrick, blood everywhere. A hero? You need courage for that. The next part was a recorded conversation. That useless boy is dead, so what? He was insignificant. A cold voice said. Just deal with his money-hungry mother. What do you mean I should go abroad to avoid trouble? You people are useless. Just bribe the doctor to declare Jessamine mentally unstable. Until she goes mad. Turn it off. This isn't true. Ilawan screamed hysterically, ordering the screen to be turned off, but Alaric stopped her, forcing her to watch the rest. The screen showed her partying wildly abroad, even using drugs to enhance the experience. Don't believe these lies. She sobbed. Enough. Alaric coldly interrupted, letting go of her hand. In her despair, Ilawan suddenly burst into maniacal laughter. I stood quietly, watching her madness, having long awaited this day. Jessamine! Ilawan suddenly grabbed a fruit knife and charged at me, but Leander quickly stepped in, kicking the knife away. The police arrived and arrested Ilawan for assault. The melody of Dream Wedding still echoed in the air. Memories of being 16 flashed in my mind. My mother was still alive, and Merrick was by my side. Once, we sneaked into the school's piano room to practice Dream Wedding and my composition. Dreamlike. Merrick had said. If we ever have a wedding, I hope you'll play your own version. Chapter 9. Ilawan was sentenced to 15 years in prison for intentional injury leading to death. Her famous piece was revealed to be plagiarized, and the Music Association revoked her membership, stripping her of all her former glory. The once prodigious piano girl's halo was gone. Abandoned by Alaric and facing imprisonment, her spirit completely broke. In prison, she spent her days fantasizing about participating in international competitions, playing beautiful piano pieces. Merrick's case caused a huge stir online, prompting me to hold a live stream to explain the situation. It happened on my 15th birthday. My mother had gone out to teach, and Merrick's drunken father knocked on our door, attempting to assault me. Merrick, returning from a city competition with a music box to surprise me, found the door ajar and saw his father attacking me, my clothes torn. The music box fell, shattering into pieces. For the first time, Merrick stood up to his father to protect someone else. His father showed no mercy, whipping Merrick with a belt. As Merrick fell, a shard from the broken music box cut his brow, blood trickling down his face. In a desperate moment, as his father lunged at me again, Merrick grabbed a nearby fruit knife and, in a tragic accident, fatally stabbed his father. The scene was drenched in blood, leaving everyone in shock. When I recover, I'll teach you both a lesson. His father, lying on the floor, continued to spew venomous words. Especially you, you shameless girl. Your mother was just a woman who got pregnant out of wedlock. Terrified, I wanted to call the police, but Merrick stopped me, knowing the consequences. We watched as his father's life ebbed away. Despite the upcoming high school entrance exams, Merrick was detained for 2 months. Later, someone who knew the truth came forward, clarifying that Merrick's father was a notorious troublemaker who often took pleasure in bullying his son. As time passed, the incident faded from public memory, and the online outrage subsided. Merrick's mother, unable to profit from her son's story, had her accounts banned and all ill-gotten gains confiscated. "Please, for Merrick's sake, help us," she pleaded, kneeling before me, tears blurring her vision. But I felt no sympathy. She had never cared for her son's well-being, only seeking financial gain. When Merrick died, she accepted hush money instead of seeking justice. "Years ago, you swapped my medication, worsening my condition and falsely claiming I had a mental disorder. Did you ever think you'd face retribution?" I said coldly, shaking off her grasp. "At least you gave Merrick life." At my words, she lost control, pulling a knife from her bag and lunging at me. Fortunately, Leander appeared just in time to shield me. Security quickly intervened, and she was sentenced to a year in prison. Seeing Leander's blood-stained hands and clothes, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and sorrow. "Don't worry, I'm fine. It doesn't hurt at all," he reassured me, despite his obvious pain. Chapter 10. "Jessamine, I'm truly sorry," Alaric said, his eyes filled with exhaustion. "I never imagined Alawan would do such things to you." I smiled faintly at him. He explained that the person he had been searching for all along was me, and the piece he heard in the piano room was played by me. For years, he mistakenly believed it was Alawan, which led to his favoritism towards her. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. So this was why Alawan had bullied me. She couldn't stand the thought of Alaric liking me, so she stole my music and tried to replace me, trampling on my dignity. The most innocent person in all of this was Merrick. He refused to join Alawan in bullying me and instead protected me as best he could. In the end, he was brutally treated by them and pushed from the school rooftop, his death staged as a suicide. When I reported it, the school suppressed the truth, labeling me as delusional. When Merrick lay in a pool of blood, his mother accepted hush money, claiming he had taken his own life due to stress. Alawan fled abroad, and I was sent to a psychiatric hospital. "You were part of this too," I shouted, throwing my coffee in Alaric's face. But he didn't get angry, he just lowered his head and apologized. "I once thought we could be together," I said, standing up. "I wanted to have our child, but you destroyed everything." Alaric remained silent, his lips tightly shut. I knew he would act soon. Sure enough, 10 hours later, I received a video. In it, Alawan was tied up in an abandoned warehouse, and Alaric was branding her with a burning piece of wood, leaving deep scars on her face and body. The smell of burning flesh seemed to seep through the screen. Even the cruelest person is still human. When I saw Alaric again, his eyes were bloodshot. He reached out to me, but I recoiled. "I've washed myself several times," he said, looking aggrieved. "I avenged you. Can you forgive me? If you truly want to take responsibility, turn yourself in." The sound of sirens soon filled the air, and the police arrived to arrest Alaric. When news of his assault on Alawan spread, it caused a huge uproar. The footage of Alaric's violence against Alawan went viral, sparking widespread debate. Each court session was closely followed by netizens. The Alaric family spent a fortune trying to bail him out, but in this age of law and public scrutiny, it was impossible. Ultimately, Alaric was sentenced to 15 years in prison. "I told you she was a jinx, bringing nothing but misery to our family," Mrs. Spencer yelled at me outside my house. "Justice prevails," I replied coldly. "He only got 15 years, but some people lost their lives." The 7-year saga of love and hatred finally came to an end. I despised Alawan and hated Alaric even more. Their actions drove Merrick to madness and addiction, while Alaric's obsession led him to marry again and spiral into insanity. Alawan's return marked the end of her innocence. Alaric was complicit, turning a blind eye to Alawan's actions. When I was tortured and bleeding on the ground, Alaric's feet were stained with my blood, his face indifferent. I begged him to help me escape, but he watched coldly as the police took me away. A month in the psychiatric hospital was like hell. Forced to take medication that made me feel terrible, I endured the agony of my heart's irregular beats. On the 31st day, my uncle managed to get me out and into surgery for a heart transplant using Merrick's donated heart. After learning the truth, my uncle took just a month and a half to dismantle the Alaric family's power. He had no regard for those who had threatened me. On the day of the car accident that killed Alawan's parents, I found an old photo among Mr. Spencer's belongings, revealing my mother's story. My uncle, Mr. Spencer, and my father had all loved the same woman, my mother. My mother chose to marry my father, but my grandparents opposed it, arranging another woman for him. My mother, waiting in vain, returned home and gave birth to me. After a chance encounter, my father saw my mother with another man, mistakenly believing she had betrayed him and cut off all contact. After middle school, my health deteriorated, requiring urgent heart surgery. My mother brought me to the city, hoping for better resources, but it became our nightmare. The money saved for my treatment was quickly depleted, and my mother sought help from my father. On her way to meet him, she was hit by a car and died protecting me. Alawan, passing by, smirked. My father coldly blamed me for my mother's death. At 16, I became reclusive, relying on medication to stay stable. Merrick and I supported each other through difficult times, despite his own scars and Alawan's bullying. Not wanting to be a burden, Merrick stopped me from ending my life, promising to always be there for me. But Merrick was gone. Chapter 11. Leander was adopted by my uncle. The day he confessed his feelings, it was snowing heavily outside. Leander told me that my uncle had always cared for my mother. He had visited Springfield many times, but my mother never agreed to see him. When I was 5, my uncle adopted 7-year-old Leander and made him promise to marry and protect me when we grew up. As a child, I was rebellious, unhappy about having a betrothed. I secretly visited Springfield to see you, but back then, your heart belonged to Merrick. I don't care if your last name is Ellis or Miller, will you marry me? I felt no emotion and refused him outright. I could see the disappointment and despair in Leander's eyes, but it didn't change my mind. Having once loved someone deeply, no one else could move my heart. Marrying Alaric was purely for revenge, using love as a weapon. Love makes people willing to give everything, and if they can't have it, they'll regret it forever. Despite knowing the severe consequences, Alaric still took the risk. On a snowy day, I went to my mother's grave, bringing a bouquet of plum blossoms and her photo. In the familiar alley, I seemed to see Merrick standing there in his red coat. When we were both in our zodiac year, my mother bought us matching red down jackets. This color looks like a bride's dress. Merrick joked, wrapping a scarf around my head playfully. You're so annoying. I pushed him away, walking into the snow alone. Will you marry me when you grow up? Merrick chased after me, stepping on the snow, repeatedly asking, while I felt only irritation. Now, I wished I could hear those playful words again. After returning to Springfield as a music teacher, Leander visited me almost every year during the holidays. During the new year, I would go to the capital to spend time with my father and uncle. One day, I found Merrick's mother lying in the snow, covered in blood. She had been caught stealing food and was hit by a car while fleeing. With the family's downfall, Mrs. Spencer sold all their assets and moved abroad. My friend Bryony got married, her groom a few years younger than her. At the wedding, she threw the bouquet to me, wishing I'd find my happiness soon. I just smiled and nodded. Later, Leander generously funded a library for our school, naming it after Merrick. He also established a foundation in the city under the same name to support education in impoverished areas. Though Leander had always silently protected and expressed his feelings for me, I never accepted them. Due to the inconvenience of long-distance relationships, Leander eventually decided to move back to Springfield. When Bryony's child started school, Alaric, newly released from prison, chose to settle here and start anew. However, the community's scrutiny quickly led to the closure of his small company. He tried various jobs, all ending in failure, and eventually became a cemetery caretaker. One night, I had a heart attack and braved the snowstorm to the nearest temple for peace. There, I unexpectedly encountered Alaric. Snowflakes danced in the air as I drew a fortune slip, which turned out to be very auspicious. On my way home, I saw Alaric's cracked hands. I'm sorry, but I can't forgive what you did. That night, I dreamed of a young Merrick, while I had grown old. Let's watch the new movie together. He invited warmly. Just as I was about to hug him, I woke up, realizing it was impossible. In this idealized dream, there was no domestic violence, my parents were happily married, and I became a top student, later working in IT and living a fulfilling life. Without heart disease, I grew up healthy, married, and had children, living happily ever after. As the morning light filled the room, I thought how wonderful it would be to have the one you love by your side, pursuing your passions freely. But where was that person now? My vision blurred, and I saw a familiar figure approaching with freshly picked peaches. Jessamine, try these sweet yellow peaches. The end. One morning, as usual, Leander waited outside for Jessamine to join him for a walk. When she didn't come out by 10, he grew worried and called the police. They broke in to find her peacefully passed away, a slight smile on her face, as if finally free. According to her wishes, her ashes were placed next to a tombstone engraved with Merrick. At the farewell ceremony, Leander's grief was evident, tears streaming down his face. Alaric, indifferent, only remembered that winter when miraculously crepe myrtles bloomed. Every spring and autumn, someone would come to clean the area around the two adjacent tombstones, keeping them pristine, as if newly set.